as I explained with Moby Dick, there's different styles of writing. There's different types of writing. There's narrative, which tells a story, expository, which tells how to do something, and persuasion. So one of the things about the Swiss Family Robinson, like Moby Dick, was there's a lot of expository. There's a lot of explaining things. So here they are. They explain how to make butter and how to make candles and about manufacture of sago. Now, sago is a small palm tree found in Southeast Asia. As I said in a previous chapter, all of the things that they're finding on the island, the only thing they have in common geographically is that they're not found in Switzerland. So this is found in Southeast Asia. The rubber is found in South America. But the bamboo is more in Asia and around other places too. But anyway, find the sago palm and they collect the pith in the middle and they mash it up and they dry it out. And sago is a common carbohydrate source. So you use it in the same place that you would use potatoes or wheat, or it's used, you can use it to make bread. You can use it to make other things. Bread doesn't really work quite right with it, but it can still be used to make a sort of a cake, a sort of bread thing. It falls into that category of food of, the potatoes, the cornmeal, and so it's a good carbohydrate and popular in Southeast Asia. So they talk about manufacturing the sago, and they talk about finding the rubber tree. And rubber is incredibly useful, and so now they have the ability to make waterproof shoes, waterproof clothing. This can go well to extend, you can apply the rubber over fabric, you can apply the rubber over forms, and it can just be on its own. They have animals to make leather, so they can make shoes and such out of leather, but now he's looking at making more waterproof shoes, because when you make shoes out of leather, you glue it together, you sew it together, but there's still the possibility of water infiltration through the places where the stitches are. So what you can do is that if you make it out of rubber, it's one solid piece. And so not only is it watertight, it's airtight. So that may be useful later. They found the sow, and the sow had piglets. So now that they have a use for the sow, because before the sow was just, as I said in the last chapter, the sow was like, it's a sow. If you don't have a boar to go with the sow, then you aren't going to have little baby sows. You aren't going to have little baby pigs. And if you're not going to have little baby pigs, then the only use for it is that, eventually you eat the sow. But the sow had little piglets, and so they have the little piglets that they can proceed to eat. They lost the donkey, the ass. It's running off with the buffalo. I'm not sure what sort of buffalo these are. Buffalo is a term that refers to a large group of things that are like cows, but not cows. Which, it's like, okay, this is a buffalo, which is sort of like a cow. You have the American bison, big, huge, furry things. You saw those out at Yellowstone. You have the Cape buffalo in Africa, which are notoriously mean, and they are big, and they are dangerous. Out of the big 5 animals hunted in Africa, I know I've said this before, the Cape buffalo is the one most likely to kill you. There's a video online of Cape buffalo defending a little baby buffalo from both lions and alligators. So you have lions and alligators fighting over this little baby buffalo, and then the buffalo herd comes back, and they just charge through. I think crocodiles, maybe alligators. I always have a problem telling.
You say alligator, I thought it was a crocodile.
Maybe it was a crocodile. I can't remember. I'm always bad with alligators and crocodiles, which is something that I shouldn't be, but I am. So, some sort of fierce water beast, green water beast with sharp, bitey teeth. So this sharp water beast with bitey teeth and greenness grabbed a little baby Cape buffalo, and then a lion came in and tried to take the little baby Cape buffalo from the fierce green bitey river monster. And then the buffalo came back, and the buffalo came back, and they charged through the lions, and the lions scattered, and they charged through the green bitey things, and the green bitey things went back into the water, and then the buffalo ran off with his family. So they were wise to try and keep the dogs away from the buffalo. And this is one of those things where they are really, really lucky to have made it. But they have a buffalo. They put a string through its nose. This is one of the classic things that people have been doing for millennia. They put a ring or a rope or something through the buffalo's nose, and it acts as kind of a leash. You can just pull on it lightly, and it's enough to convince the animal. You don't have to pull on it hard enough to cause pain, but it's enough to convince the animal. It's like, okay, I want to go this way or I want to go that way. And people have this natural tendency that you go in the direction you look. So if you're riding a bike and you look to the left, you're going to go to the left because your body just kind of naturally goes in the direction that your head turns. Or if you're riding a motorcycle, it's the same thing as riding a bicycle. You look to the left, you go to the left. You're driving a car, you look to the left, you go to the left. You're doing gymnastics, tumbling. So in a couple years, you might do gymnastics in school and you'll learn cartwheels and front rolls and handstands and all sorts of fun things like that. But you'll find out that if you look to the left, you go to the left. So when you're on the balance beam, 6 feet up, look straight ahead. Because if you look to the left, you'll go to the left. If you look to the right, you'll go to the right. If you look down, you'll go down. Unfortunately, it doesn't work looking up. Sorry, I can't say that, but if you look to the left, you go to the left. And so it's the same thing with the buffalo. They pull the nose a little bit, and it just turns the head. And so it turns the head a little bit to the left, so it goes a little bit to the left. And it almost thinks it's its idea. So they have the sago. Butter. Making butter is kind of fun and kind of tiring. And the description of the process isn't entirely... Their description of the process is somewhat right. So they took the big calabash, they put cream in it, and they put it on blankets, and they just kind of rocked the blankets back and forth so that the calabash rolled back and forth. And that, I guess, works. I've never tried doing it that way. I've worked an actual proper butter churn before when I was like 7 or 8. And that is just tiring. And there were like a whole class of 20, 30 kids, and we were all taking turns, churn the butter, churn the butter, churn the butter. And this went on forever, and we were all like, this is tiring, this sucks. And years later, I decided, hey, I want to try and make butter. And you can make butter by shaking a container. So Kool-Aid used to come in these plastic containers with a screw top lid. And because it's a screw top lid, it gives a nice tight seal. And so it had a nice tight seal. You fill it most of the way up with cream, or you fill it in 2/3, 3/4 up with cream. You tighten it down so it's a nice airtight seal, and you shake it back and forth. So shaking the cream back and forth stirs it up, and eventually it turns into whipped cream. So, whipped cream like you put on top of pies, except it's not sweet because you don't add sugar. But you get this sort of whipped cream, and the whole thing becomes this sort of chunk. And when you're shaking the cream at that point, it feels like you're shaking a brick. Because, as you start out, you shake it back and forth, and it sloshes and it builds up. And then you shake it some more, and then the whole thing is full of whipped cream. And so it's like shaking a brick, and the thing is solid. And then the fat separates. Because when you look at cream and you think it's like pure fat, it's not really pure fat. There's some proteins in there holding globules together, and there's actually some water and some other stuff. So eventually that starts breaking down, and then its shaking starts to get easier because the air is no longer entrained And so you start shaking better. And then eventually, yes, you do get a clump of butter, or you get little clumps of butter, and that kind of congeal together. But the problem with this butter is that it has the liquid solids in it. Because if you just have plain butter, go to the store, you get butter, you can set butter out on the counter and it lasts forever. Well, not forever, but it lasts and lasts and lasts weeks without worry. Um, so well that, as I said before, previous chapter, you can preserve stuff by packing it in butter. Um, the problem is that it has the milk with the water and the proteins. The milk solids and the proteins. And so what happens is that stuff can go bad real quick. So what you have to do is once you have all of the butter, you then have to rinse it 4 or 5 times, shake it up a little bit, break it down a little bit, and then rinse it some more so that you get all of the solids out of it, and then it won't go bad, and you can keep that around. Anytime I've made butter homemade, I've kept it in the fridge because I've never been sure I've gotten enough of the solids out, enough of the milk out, enough of the cream out so that it might go bad. So I kept that in the fridge. But making butter is fun, and we can try it sometime together. And then they made candles, and they talked about 2 different ways of making candles. Now, when I was a kid, the whole family, all of us, were fire people. We liked fire and playing with fire and putting our hands and running our fingers through the candle flames and things like that. But so we made candles as kids, and there's 2 different ways to do it. They first start out with the dip method, where you take a string, which is going to be the wick, and you dip that into wax, and you pull it out, and you set it aside, and you let it cool. And you dip it in the hot wax, you pull it out, you set it aside, and you let it cool. And you repeat this, and this adds like a 16th of an inch. It adds like half a millimeter or something silly like that. It adds like, it's like half a millimeter or a millimeter maybe of wax around the outside each time you dip it. And so this is an easy way to make candles. It makes them tapered because the wax, you dip it, and as you pull it out, the wax runs down, so the bottom of the candle gets fatter than the top of the candle. But yeah, it's okay. And so that makes, tall, skinny candles. And that's a way that works well, but it's labor intensive. You have to keep the wax hot. It's just a pain. The other method that they talked about but didn't actually do yet was they pour candles. And so what you do is you take the wick and you put a little weight down in the bottom so it goes all the way to the bottom of the thing. Or sometimes you have the wick running up through the bottom of the mold. And then you pour wax in. Pour wax in the top, and the wax fills up, and then it hardens. And as the wax hardens, it squeezes in some. So as it squeezes in some, you can pull it out of the mold after it cools and hardens, which is a much easier way of doing things. And candle making is kind of fun, and maybe we'll get around to doing that sometime. There's all sorts of fun things that you can do with candles. Sand candles. Sand candles. We might do that. Sand candles. Anyway, what you do is you take a bucket of sand and you put a thing in the middle of the bucket of sand so that it presses on the outside. And you then pour hot wax into the sand. And that wax sort of infuses the sand, so it kind of takes the shape of the bucket of the sand. And then the wax fills up the middle. And so that gives you a candle with sand around the outside, which is really kind of cool looking. Another thing that I've done, which was also fun, was an ice candle. And you're like, ice candle? How do you do an ice candle? Well, with an ice candle, you take crushed ice and you put it in around the wick, and then you pour the hot wax in. And when you pour the hot wax in, the wax goes around the ice and goes in between. And because the ice is so cold, the wax instantly hardens right where the ice is. And so what happens is that when you pull the candle out of the mold, the water that was the ice pours out, and you have this candle with this sort of lace work of ice or this lace work of gaps where the ice was. So that's a kind of cool thing to do. as well. And so that's candle making. They made it from berry wax. Often it's made from beeswax or tallow is animal fat. And he was complaining they didn't have any animal fat to mix in with the candle wax. But that's kind of a specious argument because he's been using animal fat all over the place and he's got it from various different things. So that is an option. But candle making is fun. Candle burning is fun, but you have to be careful. I'm not sure I'd want to live in a tree house and use candles. That just strikes me as bad business, but I guess if you're careful.